They thought it was just another development deal. 125 houses rising quickly, streets paved, families moving in. But the land they built on wasn't theirs. It belonged to one woman who refused to be erased. For years, she watched silently, waiting, planning. And when the moment came, her trap snapped shut. What the HOA believed was a victory would turn into their greatest downfall. The question is, how far can one woman go to reclaim what was stolen? She wasn't a politician, a lawyer, or a millionaire. She was simply a woman who carried her family's history in the soil beneath her feet. Generations had lived, worked, and built their lives on that land. It was her inheritance, her pride, and her last connection to the people who came before her. But to the HOA, it was just acreage, an empty canvas for profit. For months, she watched the slow encroachment. Surveyors walking the boundary lines, strangers taking measurements, paperwork she never signed suddenly appearing in county offices. Then came the machines, loud, relentless, carving roads where her grandmother once planted crops. The first houses looked harmless, just frames of wood. But soon, row after row of identical homes rose from the ground, swallowing acres that were never theirs to claim. Families moved in, laughter filled the air, and neighbors waved from porches built on stolen soil. Every evening, she stood at the edge of her property line, silent, watching. She could have screamed. She could have fought openly. But she chose patience instead, because she knew something the HOA didn't. A mistake they had already made, one they wouldn't see coming until it was far too late. And while they celebrated their victory, she was quietly setting the stage for theirs, and their homeowners' downfall. The trap was already in motion. The only question was how long before they realized they'd built their dream community on a ticking time bomb. At first, the HOA barely noticed her. To them, she was just a neighbor living on the last untouched parcel of land, a stubborn holdout refusing to upgrade her property. They sent letters, offered her money, even pressured her with warnings about community standards. But she never responded. Silence became her weapon. What they didn't realize was that she had been documenting everything. Every misplaced stake, every unapproved extension, every inch of development that crept past legal boundaries. She had it all recorded, neatly filed away, waiting. Each home they built deeper into her land only strengthened her case. The HOA, confident in their power, grew reckless. They advertised the community as fully secure, boasting of new roads, utilities, and endless amenities. Buyers signed contracts, families settled in, and property values soared. But behind the smiles and open houses, cracks were already forming. Cracks no one could see but her. She noticed survey markers placed where they didn't belong. She saw construction crews bulldoze right over protected land her family had registered decades ago. She found title deeds that contradicted each other, revealing the HOA had cut corners in ways that could unravel everything. Still, she said nothing. She walked past the rows of new homes as if she were defeated. Neighbors waved politely, unaware that their entire neighborhood rested on stolen soil. Some whispered that she was bitter, maybe even broken. But in truth, she was counting the days, because she knew the law was slow but merciless. And when the right moment came, she would bring it all forward, not just to reclaim her land, but to strip the HOA of everything they thought they owned. The houses weren't just built on stolen land, they were built on borrowed time. And soon, the bill would come due. It began quietly, just a letter slipped into the HOA's mailbox. At first, they dismissed it as a mistake, some nuisance claim from the neighbor they had long ignored. But the second letter came from a law firm, thick with documentation and proof they couldn't deny. The woman had filed suit, not just against the HOA, but against every builder, developer, and bank that touched her land. Her evidence was airtight. Surveys showing illegal encroachment, deeds proving rightful ownership, and county records exposing fraudulent filings. In one move, she turned years of silence into a weapon sharper than any protest. Panic rippled through the community. Families who thought they bought safe homes now faced the truth. They had been living on property that was never legally theirs. Property values plummeted overnight. Mortgages became worthless. Insurance companies pulled out. Inside HOA meetings, voices rose in desperation. How had this gone unnoticed? Who approved construction without clear title? The board had no answers. Every decision they had made now stood as evidence against them. And the woman, she never raised her voice. She didn't have to. Court dates were set, injunctions issued, and suddenly the dream neighborhood stood frozen, trapped in lawsuits that could drag on for years. The trap was sprung. The HOA had walked straight into it, blind with arrogance, never imagining that the land they stole would become the very ground that swallowed them whole. When the verdict came, it wasn't loud, it was crushing. The court ruled in her favor, declaring every home built on her land illegally constructed. Overnight, the HOA lost everything: control, money, and credibility. The developers faced millions in damages. Banks scrambled to explain why they had financed homes on ground that didn't belong to them. But for her, it wasn't about the payout. It was about something far deeper. She had defended her ancestors' land, preserved her family's legacy, and reminded the world that power doesn't always belong to those with money or influence. Sometimes it belongs to the one who refuses to be erased. Neighbors who once saw her as stubborn now looked at her with awe and fear. They realized the quiet woman at the edge of the street had dismantled an empire without raising her voice. She hadn't just fought back. She had changed the rules of the game. The HOA's dream community stood as a warning now. For every home that still remained, buyers lived with the weight of knowing their foundation was built on stolen soil. Property signs that once boasted luxury living now whispered a darker truth. Arrogance had a price. Her story is not just about land. It's about justice, about what happens when those in power underestimate the people they try to silence. The question is, how many more must fight alone before the world finally listens?